Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing with our series explaining chapters from IB Business Management. Today is chapter 5.2, which is production methods. This is a relatively simple one. All we're doing in this chapter is explaining what are the methods of production of a product and how companies can use them. All right. So we're going to start. The first type of production is job production. This is quite an antiquated style of production. This is what they did really way back when you had, if you needed a suit, for instance, you had a tailor and you specifically went and they made you a very specific suit. Or if you needed a violin, well, they went and they made you your violin perfectly suited to you. Job production means one person is specifically suited to make everything throughout the entire process. So this means you get a very specialized product, but it's meant for specialized types of cases. You can't produce on a mass level with job production. All right. Next is batch production. This is when you create a limited number of identical products, also known as a batch, at a time. This is when your demand is unclear and you just need to have a certain amount of this to give to a consumer. And this is normally done when a business produces a large range of products. They produce batches of each thing. Let's say, you produce batches of chocolates or batches of CPUs for computers or batches of notebooks, for instance. You produce batches of your product together. All right. After this, we have flow, flow production, also known as line production, also known as mass production. They're all the same thing. This is continuous production of a standardized product. This means it's very capital intensive. We're going to get to what that is in a second. But it's a very capital intensive process, but you're basically constantly producing your product. So let's say you're producing sneakers and you're just constantly producing sneakers. All right. So instead of it being batches, which are like periodically, maybe you come out with, let's say, if you're Nike, you might produce like a batch of, Kyrie's, for instance. But in a flow production strategy, you would just be constantly producing sneakers and you wouldn't have batches. You just have constant production, always coming out with new products. Then you have cell production. This is a modern adaptation of the assembly line. This is where you have parts of production are delegated to teams, also known as cells. So each of them does a certain thing. If you're producing a shoe, well, in that case, you have one part of the team is in charge of producing the sole, other part kind of the body of it, another part the laces, another part the tongue. All right, and maybe a different part to test the quality, the durability. So you have different parts of the production process that are in charge of different parts of producing the sneaker. And any member of a team can contribute, or any team can contribute. And the idea is that these cells work independently, but they do depend on each other. Because obviously, if you need to produce a shoe, the sole department can't produce the whole thing. They can only produce their parts. They depend on each other, but each of them works independently, and they're specialized. They're specialized in the specific part of the product that they have to make. Then we have the difference between labor and capital intensive. So capital intensive, this means a high proportion of capital costs compared to labor costs. Capital, as we'll remember, is any kind of, materials, raw materials, production equipment, things like that. So capital intensive means you're spending a lot of money on the equipment and things like that, and not as much money on the personnel and the people. This usually leads to increased output and productivity and more standardized production. All right. But also you have high fixed costs because you have to get a lot of machinery and locations and equipment, and low profit margins because you're producing a standardized product that people aren't going to want to pay a ton of money on a premium for because it's it's a very standardized product. Also, you need a sufficient amount of demand to justify this investment. As I've said, very high fixed costs. So if you're going to spend millions of dollars on these different factories and equipment, well, then you need enough money coming from the outside, from demand of the customers, to be able to pay for all of those fixed costs. Labor intensive is the other kind. This is basically the exact opposite, where you have a high proportion of labor to the amount of capital. This is often used for job production, which, as we'll remember, job production means a specific type of, one person is doing one job, is unique or one-off throughout the entire process, and also in the service sector. This is normally personalized, but also has more HR issues because you have more personnel. So think of, you go in and you get a massage. That's a labor intensive type of thing because you need a masseuse. There's not a lot of equipment involved in this. It's just the masseuse giving you the massage. The same as if you're getting, other kinds of services. That's a labor intensive type of thing. Or if I gave the example earlier of job production. If you go to the tailor and they make you a specifically tailored suit to you, well, that's a labor intensive thing because mainly the cost is the person who's an expert in making the suit and who's, specializing it to the demands of the client. Finally, the last thing is businesses. So they use these different methods of production, and often they combine them. For example, with Burger King, they use batch production because they make the hamburger patties, right? But normally they send those frozen to each of their locations. So they batch produce these hamburgers, and then within the joint, within each hamburger or each Burger King location, each employee is then doing job production, because depending on the demands of each customer, say you want a burger with no mayo, with extra tomato and whatever, well, then they have to specifically make the burger according to your demands. So each of the ingredients has come to them batch produced, but then they're individually using job production to create the hamburger specifically for you. So this allows for the possibility of customization, flexibility, and lower cost, because you can combine what's the optimal production method in each phase of production to make it so that you can have the most efficient process of delivering a product to your customers. And with that, guys, that is the end of this chapter. Pretty simple one. If you guys have any questions, do remember to leave them down below. Hope this video has been useful. For standard level, guys, you only have one video left. 5.3 is high level, as well as all 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7. So you guys only have 5.4, which will be coming out very shortly. And then you guys are done with business management. You guys don't have to listen to me anymore. So anyway, with that, hope you guys have enjoyed. Thank you for watching until the end, and best of luck in the rest of your studies.